let me know.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I need to shut this off. Okay, so now my computer decided to wake up naturally, of course. So, okay, so welcome to the menopause relief class. We are going to be talking today about, like I said, natural ways that you can relieve menopause symptoms. We will be going over kind of what typical menopause symptoms are, and then some things you can do nutritionally and also lifestyle wise to help relieve those symptoms. And I just want to Okay. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about menopause symptoms? So there are so many, and they can be different for everybody. They can come and go differently for everybody. Yours might be more intense than someone else's, and sometimes we're not sure why that is. Sometimes it can be a little bit genetic, but also there's a whole lot of lifestyle involved. So for example, in Eastern countries and countries that eat a more whole food diet, more natural diet without all the processed foods that we tend to eat here in the United States, only about 7% of women even get any type of menopause symptoms. In other words, they just eventually stop getting their period with no hot flashes, no bloating and irritability and anxiety and trouble sleeping. None of that stuff happens for them. And so like I said, like only 7% or so of women in the world have these issues that we seem to see all over the place in the United States. So why is that? Well, it's a lifestyle based. And when I say lifestyle based, I mean all parts of our lifestyle. We tend to have more stress in this country. We tend to eat a more processed diet. And we tend to overdo. So we don't get enough sleep. We don't get enough downtime. We don't do the self-care thing. We tend to be just running, a million miles an hour, trying to take on everything. And this does have a negative effect. So menopause symptoms, normal menopause symptoms in the United States. It's not normal to have these, but in the United States, we do. So what is a normal menopause symptom? Things like depression, anxiety, these can get worse during menopause. Nervousness, you might feel kind of like worked up more often, irritable. So you might be a little moodier. It seems like you don't have the patience that you used to have with your kids or your employees or your spouse, right? Insomnia is super common. That, where you either have trouble falling asleep, or you can fall asleep, but then you wake up and you're just kind of up. I don't know if you guys have experienced that personally. That is a thing that does happen to me, where like I can fall asleep, but if I wake up, I'm up. I might be up for like 3-4 hours in the middle of the night. It's terrible. It isn't happening too often lately since I've made some changes, but that is very common. I hear about it a lot. Other things, night sweats all the time now. Yeah, it's tough. Night sweats and hot flashes. Now, this is something I don't experience, thankfully, but I know some people do. And I'm going to give you some tools that are going to help with that. Weight gain. We're going to go into a little bit of why you're gaining weight. Forgetfulness. So you get like sort of like pregnancy brain. It's a hormone thing, you guys. Okay. And then vaginal tissue thinning. So when that happens, you might have sex might be more painful, things like that. You will have irregular periods. You could have bouts of really, really heavy bleeding. You might skip a few months. Your periods are going to change. They might get just shorter and lighter. They can change all over the place. So these are all the kind of common symptoms that we can experience in menopause. So I want to talk to you guys about some natural ways that you can deal with that and some lifestyle things that can help. So I'm going to kind of go through these a little slowly and explain some of them, why they're happening, and then give you some ideas of things that might help. Um, so again, realizing that many cultures have little to no menopause symptoms at all, it's clear that it is a lifestyle issue. And so it's not just a normal part of aging as a woman. Like I said, it has become normalized in the United States just because so many of us experience it. But if we would alter our lifestyle, it would not be considered normal. And in most countries, it's not considered normal. Um, some of the things that you may be experiencing, like I said, anxiety, depression, forgetfulness, and things like hot flashes and night sweats, these are hormone based. Your hormones fluctuate not only monthly, but daily, like throughout the day, your hormone levels. And this is why hormone replacement therapy can be tough to figure out what you would need. And I'm not saying I recommend hormone replacement therapy. I actually don't recommend that. But it's hard for even a doctor to determine what hormones you need because they fluctuate throughout the day. So if they were to test you in the morning, in the evening, you're going to look you're going to have a completely different hormone profile. But there are things that you can do to balance those hormones so that they're not fluctuating quite so wildly all over the place every single day. And a lot of it is nutritional. But some of it, just to help you understand, one of the things that you need to make sure of is that your gut is healthy, because most of your hormones are actually produced in your gut. We tend to think of hormones as and they are produced by the ovaries too, don't get me wrong. Your uterus and your ovaries do produce hormones, but a lot of your hormone regulation comes from having a healthy gut. Things like serotonin are produced largely in the gut, and serotonin is not just used for like happy brain function. It is also a huge part of the digestive process. So you can see that when your gut is not healthy, your hormone levels won't be either. So it's really important to know, how do you know if your gut needs to be healed? Well, if you have regular indigestion problems, like feeling really bloated after a meal, or stomach aches, if you're irregular, as far as if you're going from constipation to diarrhea, or you have one or the other, or flip-flopping between both, that's an indication that there's a gut issue. If you are tired all the time, if you have heartburn, these are indications that there's a gut issue going on. And also the anxiety and depression. Now, like I said, that does occur because of hormone fluctuations, but also it occurs because of vagus nerve function. Your vagus nerve it's called the wandering nerve, and it's a super important nerve in your body. It runs from your brain to your gut. It is the super highway of your nervous system. So, and it goes in both directions. So this is the reason why when you are nervous, you will feel butterflies in your stomach, or when you get upset, you might feel nauseous, or you might lose your appetite when something upsets you, because what you feel up here in your brain, your vagus nerve is constantly in communication between your gut and your brain. And so they're very interconnected. So when you have a problem going on in one area, like if you have a leaky gut, you're more likely to have anxiety or depression or insomnia, and vice versa. If you're upset all the time, it's going to affect your gut, right? So then your hormones are not going to be able to balance, because you don't have that healthy communication, and you don't have that strong, healthy gut producing the right amount of hormones. But also, it is extremely normal and part of the process for the hormone levels to shift as we go through menopause, through perimenopause and menopause. Why? Because you no longer, your body is no longer being prepared to house a baby, right? If you don't need to grow a baby, you don't need all the hormones that would produce that lining, that protective lining in the uterus, and all of those other things. So you should see a reduction in some of the hormones. The problem comes when the hormones are not being fed properly by your nutrition and your lifestyle, so that one really gets out of whack with the other. And then you start to see problems like when your estrogen goes too high or drops too low. It can really, really affect the level of the symptoms that you're having. So there are things you can do nutritionally that can help balance hormones, things like adding soy. And I just want to let you know that I know that some people really avoid soy because some people are still under the false impression that soy is bad for you. Back in the 1980s, soy got a really, really bad rap. And the reason why soy got a really, really bad rap in the United States is because two industry-driven studies, keep in mind, all science you need to consider the source. Whenever there's a study on anything, just because there's a study on anything doesn't mean the study's accurate. It depends on who funded it, who set it up, and how they set it up. And understand that a lot of times in science, studies are set up by the person paying for it because they want a certain outcome. If they want to show you, don't eat soy, don't drink soy milk because we want you to buy dairy milk, then the Dairy Council is going to set up a study that will prove that soy is bad for you in some kind of way, because then you'll avoid it and you'll go back to dairy milk. So this happens a lot in the scientific community. And so in the 1980s, there were two studies done, very poorly designed studies, industry funded studies that were trying to prove that soy was dangerous, that it could promote breast cancer, or that it somehow emasculated men. In both of those studies, they used men, and both times men were given like between 50 and 300 servings of soy a day. Okay, they were given astronomical amounts of soy, and at those levels, you might see some kind of strange fluctuations. Anything in that kind of excess is going to cause your body a problem, obviously. So they didn't design it in a way that would show if you eat a normal amount of soy, because who the heck's going to eat 30 servings of soy in a day, right? If you eat one serving a day or 3 servings a week, you're only going to see benefits, or it's going to be completely neutral. And by the way, Asian women have not gotten the memo that soy promotes breast cancer, because over there, they don't have breast cancer like we do here, and they don't have menopause symptoms like we do here. So I just want to relieve any fears that you might have that soy is going to promote something. There are phytoestrogens in soy, but I want to reassure you that those phytoestrogens do not increase the amount of estrogen in your bloodstream. What they do is help regulate the amount of estrogen. So phytoestrogens in soy are actually working to regulate the amount of estrogen your own body is producing, so that you're not producing way too much or way too little. So it actually helps regulate. One of the best things to get soy from is called nattokinase. It's in, you may have heard of natto. Natto is not yummy. Okay. It's kind of slimy. It's kind of weird. But it's fermented soybeans are where they get that from. So what can you do instead? You can use, either you can take nattokinase in a supplement form, or you can use other forms of organic soy. So you could do tempeh tofu, edamame. Just make sure it's organic. So it's not GMO, it's not, full of chemicals and like pesticides and things like that. Go with the organic and you're going to be fine. If you hate soy, that's okay too. You don't have to include it. I'm just letting you know this is one really simple way to kind of help your estrogen regulate itself. Other foods, there are plenty of other foods. So if you don't like that one, you could use things like there's nuts like Brazil nuts. There are seeds, flax seeds. There's a seed cycling that you can do throughout the month. And if you're interested in that, you can let me know. I do have on my website, tracybeeler.com, I do have an entire article on seed cycling that explains how to do it, where you do one half of the month, the first half of your cycle, you're doing 2 seeds. I believe it's pumpkin and flax, and then sesame and sunflower. So it rotates through the month. And those seeds all affect hormones and can help balance them. If you don't get a cycle anymore, you can still do seed cycling. You just follow the moon phase. And if you go into my blog, you will see the article explains very well how to do that. But you don't even have to make it that complicated. Just add some ground flax seeds, a tablespoon a day. Not only does this help you balance hormones, it prevents cancer. It prevents breast cancer. They have done studies where as little as 1/3 of a teaspoon a day of ground flax seeds dramatically reduce a woman's risk of getting breast cancer or of reoccurrence of breast cancer if you've already had it. So how can you add flax seeds? Always, they have to be ground. They don't do you any good if they're not ground. They just slip right through you and out the other end, and they've done nothing. So they need to be ground. Keep them in the freezer so that they stay fresh longer and they don't go rancid on you. You can add them to shakes, like smoothies, oatmeal bowls. I put them in baked goods. Like I made breakfast cookies yesterday with my son. We put them in there, muffins, sprinkle them on your salad. There's like so many ways. You can just eat them. Just eat a tablespoon of ground flax seeds just by themselves. Super easy. So adding things like flax seeds is really, really helpful. Other things, dark green leafy veggies and cruciferous veggies. That is because these promote gut health. And when we eat things that promote gut health, and they're also high in calcium, you are going to help regulate your hormones because your gut's going to be healthy. Like I talked about a few minutes ago, it's going to help the fluctuation of the hormones to be eating things that are strengthening your gut. So the other thing is that I want to talk about is high fat, low fat. What kind of things do we want to be kind of avoiding, right? So a high fat, low fiber diet, which is kind of the standard American diet. It tends to be a lot higher in fat and very low in fiber. We have this thing in this country in the last couple of years that we're super focused on protein. Every single thing you see out there is like, protein bars and protein shakes, and they add protein to cereal and granola bars and energy drinks, and they're like constantly with the protein. Protein is not your problem. It is extremely rare to not get enough protein. But what we do tend to lack is fiber. We are not eating anywhere near enough fiber. So in the United States, we have a tendency to be eating about twice as much protein as we actually need and about half the amount of fiber that we actually need. And if we could flip-flop that, we would see a massive healing of our guts and a whole lot less problems when it comes to our hormones. So a high fat, low fiber diet can cause growth of bacteria in the bowel that actually convert bile acids into sex hormones. So, and then they get absorbed into the bloodstream, and now you have too much, right? And now you have too much of this hormone running around, and now you start to get the really heavy bleeding, and you can end up with fibroids or cysts or things like that. Because the high fat, low fiber diet increases the production of enzymes that free estrogen. So estrogens are bound so that they can be like extra estrogen gets bound to other cells and gets swept through your system and out. And when you eat high fat, low fiber, it unbinds the estrogen and it can be reabsorbed into your bloodstream. So now you have more than you should. So in nations where they eat higher fiber, lower fat, you tend to see more estrogen in their stool. This is a good thing. It means the excess is leaving their body. That's what we should be doing, but we are not eating enough fiber in this country. So keep that in mind. Something else. So we want to be switching to a little bit lower fat, a little bit higher fiber. How can you do that? Swap what's on your plate. Let me grab a piece of paper and try to draw this for you. Swap what is on your plate. So instead of the way we tend to eat in this country is we tend to put the main dish, which tends to be meat. And then we put like a carb, and then we put like maybe a veggie over here. So this is what our plate tends to look like in the United States. This whole thing is we have this big piece of meat. That's our main course, right? That's our main staple of our meal. We surround the whole rest of the meal is surrounded to that. Then we do a big chunk of carbs here, and then we'll put a few vegetables on our plate, if at all. Do you know how many adults I know that won't even eat a vegetable? It's really like, it's not good. They're not eating nearly enough. What your plate should look like, what would be a way better way to do it, is if we would do half our plate with veggies and then split up the other half to 25% protein, 25% carb. That would be a much better balance. That would automatically lower your fat because your fat's coming from these things here, and raise your fiber because it's coming from the veggies over here. So what contains fiber? Fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, whole grains. By whole grains, I don't mean buying wheat bread. Wheat bread is still a processed carbohydrate, so it doesn't really have much fiber in it. So when I say a whole grain, I mean steel cut oats or rolled oats, but not the quick cooking ones. Brown rice, quinoa, wheat berries, sorghum. There's literally tons of higher fiber grain options out there. And bonus, they are high in protein. So this is why I'm saying if you eat these foods, you don't have to focus on protein. You're going to get enough. There's more protein per calorie in broccoli than there is in steak. Now, there's also a lot fewer calories in broccoli, so you would have to eat a mountain of it to get the same amount of protein that's in a piece of steak. But the good news is you're already probably getting more protein than you need anyway, so not a big deal. So if you switch your plate to be at least 50% veggies, or at breakfast, 50% fruits, and then 25% of some kind of carb and 25% of some kind of protein, you're going to kind of automatically shift to the higher fiber, lower fat diet that is going to help your body balance those hormones. Other foods that are triggering your menopause symptoms, dairy is a huge culprit of this. Dairy is probably the biggest culprit of hormone-driven acne, of cramps, of heavier bleeding. It's also a culprit in things like migraines, anxiety and ADHD symptoms, allergies, seasonal allergies, arthritis, pain, and inflammation. Dairy is acidic and it is inflammatory. And for many people, even if you are not lactose intolerant specifically, your body may struggle with dairy, and because dairy is high in estrogen, it's high in hormones. Why? Because it comes from a lactating animal. Mammals lactate when they are either pregnant or just had a baby. All mammals, cows, whatever, I don't care what the mammal is. If they're lactating, it's because they had a baby or are pregnant. So in order to produce dairy, they keep cows pregnant. So they constantly, as soon as they have a baby, they will re-inseminate them. That's how we get dairy. So whether or not your dairy says no added hormones, that's talking about growth hormones, which is a whole other issue that we don't need to get into today. But it's impossible for it to not be full of estrogen because it came from a lactating animal. So it's going to increase your estrogen levels and increase your body's need to get rid of estrogen. And remember, I said your estrogen is supposed to be bound so it can leave your body. Well, when you eat higher fat, it binds it. Well, guess what? What is cheese? Almost pure fat. And I know everybody loves cheese. Don't get me wrong. I know it's delicious. But when you think about the amount of fat in it and the fact that it's also full of estrogen, it's going to exacerbate your symptoms. Okay. So learning to avoid dairy is a great idea. If you can find a dairy alternative, sometimes you have to be careful. I don't super encourage people to use like cheese alternatives just because they're processed, right? But if it gets you, and if it helps you transition to eating it less, like I don't need cheese anymore. I used to think, how in the world am I going to give up cheese? But I don't care about cheese. I don't miss cheese. I don't need cheese. I don't crave cheese anymore. But I did use some transition foods. So you can do things like cashew milk cheeses, or there's soy cheeses. Again, these are more processed. So, we don't want to be eating them all the time. But if it's going to help you with a few recipes and kind of making the transition, almond milk, cashew milk, coconut milk, those are good alternatives as well. Things like nutritional yeast, which is like a flake. It's almost like sprinkling Parmesan cheese on something. And so you can make a sauce taste cheesy by adding a little bit of nutritional yeast to it and eliminate the dairy part. And a lot of times for a lot of my clients, when we eliminate dairy, they see such a drop in symptoms for whatever chronic thing that they're dealing with that it's one of the only changes they need to make to feel a whole lot better. So that is one that I think is really, really helpful. Another thing that we need to look at is sugar. Sugar in and of itself, if you have no other problems, sugar can cause irritability, fatigue, depression, believe it or not. So added sugar is probably not helpful if you are trying to reduce your menopause symptoms. Now, that can be a tough one because if you are going through the cycle of craving things, right, you're probably craving sweets. So that can be a little bit of a tough thing to address and figure out. And I totally, oh, sorry, somebody's trying to call me. I totally understand that's a tough one. So you can always go over to my website. I do have a ton of recipes on there, and I have desserts and treats that are, don't have added sugar. What you can do is try using like dates or mashed bananas to sweeten things. Make it yourself so that you can control if you are going to add sugar. You can reduce the amount or use a more natural version like maple syrup instead of just refined sugar. Please don't use artificial sweeteners. They are not better. In fact, in many cases, they're worse. They are chemicals. They cause a host of problems for people, from migraines to cancers to all kinds of negative things. They can really negatively affect anything neurological. So if you have a depression or anxiety or ADHD or anything like that. Artificial sweeteners are not your friend. So switching to more natural things, and this can take a little time, but I've done a 3-day no sugar challenge multiple times. I do it all the time, actually, just to keep myself in check. Because I do like sweet things. I do occasionally, enjoy a sweet treat, but most of the time I can do it in a more natural way with something that has, like I said, date paste or bananas to sweeten it. Um, and if you just try having no added sugar for a couple of days, by the end of the week, you will not, you'll reset your palate, and you'll taste the natural sweetness in fruit so much more that fruit will become your sweet treat, and you'll be fine with that. So that's just one of those little challenges you can do for yourself. Just try 3 days with no added sugar. If you do that, please read a label, because things like pasta sauces, barbecue sauces, ketchup, a serving of ketchup has more sugar in it than a donut. Like, it's really a lot. So bear that in mind. And especially if it's corn syrup, that's super disruptive because it's a GMO, super disruptive to gut health. So try switching to fruit instead. Other things you can do for hormone balance, and especially, like I talked about, like vaginal thinning, tissue thinning, and things like that. Vitamin E topically in the vagina is helpful for that. Other things, there are essential oils. There are supplements made specifically for helping balance hormones. I use a couple of essential oils. I don't sell essential oils, but I have to tell you about them because they've been amazing for me. So Progestins Plus and Endoflex are two that I use every single day. I use them with a carrier oil, a little bit of coconut carrier oil, and I just rub a couple drops, like 2 drops of Progestins Plus and 2 drops of Endoflex, and I put those on my lower abdomen. Why? Because here's where the weight gain part comes in. You gain weight for several reasons, but one of which is that your body is trying to, when your estrogen starts to drop, as you're going through menopause and you're not producing as much estrogen, it's dropping. Your body's trying to compensate for that by hanging on to fat, because fat produces estrogen. So the heavier you are, the more likely you are to have menopause symptoms, because the fat cells are producing an overabundance of estrogen. So, but your body will try to pad that belly area with some extra fat to try to make up for the fact that your ovaries aren't producing as much estrogen. So bear that in mind. This can make it difficult to lose that weight. Yes, your metabolism does slow down a little bit as you age. There are other factors as well. But if you are exercising a lot and you're going, I don't know what's going on ever since I hit, 45 or 50 years old, it seems like no matter how much I exercise, I can't get rid of this belly fat. Well, you're probably struggling with hormone fluctuations, and your body is trying to do what it can to normalize them. And what it's trying to do is fix what diet is doing. Your diet's going the wrong way. So your body's like, okay, well, let's try to get some fat in here to fix this hormone fluctuation. So if you kind of switch up what you're eating, you may be able to release that. But then also, like I said, I don't like hormone replacement therapy, because hormone replacement therapy can produce its own health issues. It increases your heart attack risk and your cancer risk. But if you can do it with some like essential oils or supplements that are more natural, black cohosh, and like I said, some of these essential oils, you may find that just does just enough, or like seed cycling will do just enough to kind of offset that for you. I want to get in a little bit into fibroids. Fibroids are super, super, super common. Like something like 70 or 80% of women end up with fibroids at some point in this country. Why? Again, because we are eating the wrong stuff. And so we're creating these massive hormone fluctuations in our bodies. Um, Unfortunately, very often the medical community will, you have fibroids, you should get a hysterectomy. Um, the essential oils are Progessence Plus, Progessence, Progessence Plus, and Endoflex, Endoflex. Those are from Young Living. There are other brands like doTERRA, Revive. There are other brands that will have something similar. Those are just the ones I happen to use. And if you need to get them through somebody from Young Living, let me know, because I have friends that do that and I can recommend someone for you. And I do those daily, every day. Oh, and the other one that I use is Sense on my thyroid area. Because another thing, if you do have heavy bleeding, it could be thyroid function. If you are a little hypo, it will cause more bleeding. So find out if you have any sort of fluctuations with your TSH, because that is a possibility as you go through perimenopause, that your thyroid function will shift a little bit, and that can cause heavy bleeding. So like I said, fibroids, endometriosis, all of these things are hormone driven. But I just want to let you know some alternative things for fibroids. So a smaller fibroids, I currently have a fibroid. It's the size of a marble. So it is a smaller fibroid. This fibroid, if I my diet and get a little bit, it should shrink naturally. And in fact, it is shrinking naturally. So I've had a situation over the last 6 months or so that my nutrition, while still being a vegan and mainly plant-based, I had been adding in a little more often convenience foods. My son got married this past summer at my house. And so that threw us into a tailspin, because they moved the wedding to my house because of COVID restrictions. And so I had about 3 months to get a wedding off the ground in my home. So I went a little it was a little nuts, right? So I wasn't doing the cooking that I normally do and the food prep that I normally do. So I was kind of going towards more like prepared foods and things like that. So I grew a fibroid is what happened. And so my first OBGYN wanted me to get a complete hysterectomy. And of course, if you guys don't know, probably you do, because I talk about it all the time, but my mother passed away from ovarian cancer at the age of 52. I am currently 51. So my OBGYN, who has been taking care of me for the last 22 years, just wants me to take everything out. He's a man. And I feel like he doesn't quite understand that's a big decision to make. And it has its own long-term potential side effects. Your ovaries continue to produce hormones that are necessary and protective even after you are in full menopause. So even though you stop having a menstrual cycle, you're no longer releasing an egg every month, your ovaries are still producing some hormones. And those hormones are protective against heart disease and other health issues. And heart disease is still the number one killer of women. It's the number one killer, period, in the United States. And so keeping your ovaries until at least age 65 can protect, and you're much more likely to die of heart disease than you are of ovarian cancer. For most people, if you have an average risk of ovarian cancer, you're much better off keeping your ovaries to protect yourself from heart disease. Now, again, if your doctor recommends, please don't run to your doctor and say, Tracy told me not to do this thing that you told me to do. They may have a very good reason. And I, by am no means telling you not to do a procedure if your doctor has recommended it, but I do want you to know that there are options. Okay. And maybe you want to get a second opinion before you make that choice. You've got to do what's right for you. got a second opinion and found out that I can just have an ablation and keep all my body parts. And my fibroid is not nearly as big and scary as I was led to believe. It's the size of a marble. It is shrinking as we speak and really not interfering in any way. So I'm opting to keep all my body parts for the time being. Now, this new OBGYN that I am going to did say to me, there are fibroids can get to a point and be so disruptive and so large that the only option is to remove them. That can be a thing. You may have a very increased risk for ovarian cancer, and your doctor may say, because of your risk level, we want to take this stuff out. And that's valid as well. But I just want you to know that you do have options and you can advocate for yourself by getting a second opinion and finding out what other options might be available to you. Because my mother's ovarian cancer was clearly environmental, it's not genetic. My risk isn't really higher than anyone else's. So my choice is to keep my body parts at this point. That may change in the future, but right now that's where I'm at. So we want to be, taking into consideration, like, what are all the possible risk factors of any procedure, because every single procedure comes with risk and comes with benefit. So it's always, for me, it's always the risk benefit ratio that I need to worry about. But this is where that nattokinase that I told you about earlier from fermented soybeans can come in really helpful when it comes to fibroids. It can really help shrink them. And again, since you probably don't want to eat natto because it's not yummy, you want to get that in a supplement form if you can. So if you have questions, you guys just drop them in the chat, okay? And I'll do a little Q&A at the end. I just have a couple more things to go over with you, and then I'll stop and give you a few minutes for some Q&A. So a couple things that you can be doing besides the nutritional things that we've talked about today. Exercise, super helpful. Exercise is going to help regulate hormones. It does affect gut health. It also affects brain health, and it affects your, it can help combat anxiety, depression, and insomnia. Exercising for an average of 22 minutes a day has been shown to be very, very helpful in better sleep. Some other things you can do for better sleep: turn off screens at least an hour before you go to bed. Switch to reading a book or something. Try maybe some meditation or relaxation music, maybe some calming essential oils that you can diffuse in the room, or some, calming music, a noise, like a sound machine. Try sleeping in cotton, all cotton, because it's more breathable. So for like night sweats and things like that, cotton sheets, cotton pajamas. Try maybe a sleep mask or some earplugs. Make sure your room is very dark. Sometimes you may want to find what you're going to do if you do wake up and you're just laying there. Like, don't just wake up and lay there tossing and turning for 3 hours. For me, I get up, I go into my spare bedroom, I read for a few minutes, and this knocks me right back out. And it makes sure that I'm not disturbing my husband. And so maybe don't turn on a screen, don't turn on a TV. Maybe you're having some thoughts that are keeping you awake. Sometimes we get going, our to-do list gets going, or that anxiety starts having us, ruminating. Have a journal that you keep next to your bed that you can write down whatever thoughts are there to get them out of your head. Sometimes just getting the thoughts out of our head can help us relax, because we know we're not going to forget. We wrote it down, or we purged it out of our brain. If it's a disruptive negative thought, purging it out of your brain can really help. Some meditation every day. It helps you get into a more relaxed state. Tapping, look into tapping. Tapping is super, super helpful for me. And there's a couple of different tapping methods that can help with sleep. Find time for self-care. Stop telling yourself you're too busy and everybody else needs you. What everybody else needs is for you to be at your best self, right? Everybody else needs you to not be snapping at them because you're overworked and exhausted and irritated and all of these other things. So that might might mean you need to take yourself for a manicure or a facial once a week, or you need to take a bath every night. Oh, and if you're going to take a bath, magnesium is a great thing to add. There is magnesium bath things that you can add in, super helpful for relaxation and also hormone balance. And something else that's important is calcium. Now, I do want to tell you, so magnesium and calcium are going to work together, but I do want to caution you, we don't want to be getting our calcium from dairy products. Now, I told you earlier about how dairy can exacerbate your symptoms, but also there have been multiple studies done showing that women in countries that consume more dairy have more bone fractures as they get older. As much as dairy, they try to sell you it makes strong bones, calcium does strengthen bones, but also dairy is acidic. So in order to, you have to maintain the right blood pH or you'll die. There's no not having the right blood pH. Your body won't tolerate it. So what will happen is if you eat things that are too highly acidic, your body will leach calcium out of your bones, rebalance the pH in your bloodstream. So eating dairy while it contains calcium is forcing that acidity's there, and it's forcing your body to leach calcium right back out of your bones. So countries that consume a lot of dairy, like northern European countries and things like that, they have far more bone fractures than places that do not. So just bear in mind, getting your calcium from dark green leafies, from different types of nuts, from even a supplement is going to be better than getting it from a glass of milk. So I just want to put that out there. And one more thing on that, to prevent things like osteoporosis and bone density issues as we age, exercise with weight bearing is the best way to do that. So I talked about the fact that exercise is helpful at sleeping. It's also helpful at keeping your bones strong. I do want to let you know, though, that like DEXA scans and all this stuff, they do have a place, but know that it's normal for a woman's bone density to decrease as she ages. Why? Because our bone density is higher than men's during childbearing years, because we have to grow another human and our body's structure needs to support that. Once you don't need that anymore, it's very natural that your bone density should decrease some. It doesn't need to be overly dense, right? Because now you're not carrying babies anymore. It gets to come back down a little bit. You do want to be protected against osteoporosis and things like that. So exercise is a great way to do that. So what do we have here? To recap, we are looking at some nutritional changes, very basic and simple ones, adding a few things like some soy, some flax seeds, some dark green leafies, maybe shying away from things like alcohol, which I didn't mention, but it's not going to help your symptoms, sugar, and low fiber foods, and going more towards some high fiber, naturally sweet things like fruits, drinking plenty of water, and then maybe some supplements you might want to consider. Make sure you're getting enough B12 and calcium, maybe some, like I said, black cohosh. Maybe you're thinking about using some essential oils. Do things to help you sleep better at night, like we talked about, meditation, calming, a calming environment, and things like that. And then adding some exercise. All of these things are going to help you naturally reduce your menopause symptoms. If you are looking for more help, I do have a 12-week gut reset coming up in March. And this gut reset is really good for helping hormone balance as well. It does help with other chronic health issues, but really a lot of menopause symptoms are frankly a chronic lifestyle health issue. They don't need to be there. So you may know from the conversation that we've had today that, hey, it seems like my gut might not be as strong as I thought, and my body might be struggling more than it needs to. If that's you, then the 12-week gut reset might be a really, really good option for you. Like I said, it's coming up in March. So if you'd like more details on that, you can just shoot me a message and I'd be happy to tell you more about it. I'm gonna open up to some Q&A. If anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask that now, and I'll leave just a couple minutes for that, if there's any questions. No questions? Okay. Well, then thank you so much for tuning in. This recording is going to be available. So if anybody would like the recording, let me know and I can send it to you. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you found this helpful. If you do come up with a question that you didn't think of right now that you would like to ask me at a later time, you know I'm always here. Just feel free to message me. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. We do have a question. Does diet plan change if you've had a hysterectomy? Not necessarily. You still want to keep your, you can still control your hormone fluctuations through nutrition. Now, if you're on hormone replacement therapy and you make some of these changes, you might be able to reduce the need for hormone replacement therapy. The only difference would be if you've had a hysterectomy that has removed your ovaries, because it doesn't necessarily, you might have kept your ovaries. And in that case, you still need to do all these things because your ovaries are the main hormone producers, right? So you're still going to go through menopause if you've just had your uterus removed. If you've had all of the things removed, including the ovaries, we need to be protective against heart disease. Okay, because you've lost that little bit, that added protection that your ovaries were going to give you. So now it becomes a factor. You're not on hormones and still have ovaries. Okay, great. So you still are probably going to go through similar menopause to anybody else. The difference will be that you don't have the bleeding, but you still may have weight gain or insomnia or hot flashes or all of those other things. So all of this would still be the same. If you happen to be somebody who no longer has your ovaries, now we're talking about finding ways to eat that are heart healthy. Here's the good news there. Eating more dark green leafy veggies, eating higher fiber, eating lower fat, removing dairy, also all protective against heart disease. Yay. So this diet works, or this way of eating works for all kinds of health issues. So it's not like you have to decide between eating for hormone health and eating to prevent heart disease. They're both going to do it for you. That's the great news. The more you switch your lifestyle to taking care of yourself in the ways we've talked about here, the more you're going to reduce your risk for type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, stroke, all kinds of things. So that's the good news. So this will work whether or not you have had a hysterectomy, to answer your question. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I don't want to keep you all afternoon. I appreciate you being here. If you would like, again, like I said, if you'd like a copy of the recording, let me know. If you are interested in the 12-week gut reset, that is starting in March. And before that, I do have a 30-day program coming up, which will be a workout. I'm doing a 3-week workout group right now. After that's done, I'm going to be doing a 30-day, it's called 10 Years Younger. This program is going to be focusing on helping you build in the nutrition we've talked about today and building in exercise into your daily life. I'll be giving you kind of daily encouragement and accountability, recipes and meal ideas, and exercise guidance as well. So if that sounds like something that would be helpful to you, let me know, and I will get you more details on that. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day.